Hi, this is Steve, and here are some more of my gaming vexes.
Amid the barren wastelands of Athas lie the scattered city-states, each in the grip of its own tyrannical sorcerer king. Protecting their own positions with dark magic, they demand absolute obedience. The restless mobs are placated with bread and circuses. The arenas overflow with spectators seeking release from their harsh lives. The land outside the cities belongs to no one. Savage elves race across the deserts, while insectoid thrycrenes satisfy their taste for blood. Dwarves labour at projects beyond the scope of men, and feral halflings lie in ambush. Athas is a land of deadly magic and powerful psionics that offers no promise of glory or even of survival. Those who do not have the cunning to face life on Athas will surely perish, leaving nothing but bones bleach white under the blistering rays of the dark sun. Hello, and welcome to another episode of our Gaming Vexes, where we reflect on our ongoing efforts to run or at least play all of the games that sit on my bookshelves. Those of you who follow me on Blue Sky will know that I have a spreadsheet, my list of shame, with a not very clear system of colour coding that shows what's most likely to see play next. At the time of recording, 2024's Black Friday has been and gone, which of course has only made this task even more Sisyphean. As well as adding to the pile of 2D20 Dune RPG books, a game which has become more likely to see play soon due to the frankly bonkers Dune Prophecy series that I'm currently watching. I also purchased the starter set and core books for Modiphius' Dreams and Machines game line. Don't ask me, I just saw pictures of giant robots and that was it. It's now getting to the point that my Modiphius book acreage, comprising Star Trek Adventures, Dune, Dreams and Machines, is almost rivaling my Free League collection, which is no mean feat. Oh well, more games is better, right? Right? Anyway, as you'll have gathered, this episode we talk about our experiences using a hack of old school essentials to play in the world of Dark Sun, a 2nd edition AD&D campaign setting that was released in 1991. As I've said previously, I never played or ran any form of D&D before coming back into the hobby in 2017, and I had no real interest in any of the other D&D settings when I was still playing in the early 90s. But the Dark Sun box set, with its amazing artwork and promise of brutal, unforgiving adventure, really drew me in. The only dud note was the background colour for the campaign box, which the Paint Rack app on my phone informs me is an almost exact match for GW's Genestealer purple paint. A very odd choice to my mind, but what do I know? Wikipedia tells us that Dark Sun featured an innovative metaplot, influential artwork, dark themes, and a genre-bending take on traditional fantasy role-playing. The product line began with the original Dark Sun box set released for D&D 2nd edition in 1991 and originally ran until 1996 and was one of TSR's most successful releases. It then skipped 3rd edition but resurfaced in 4th edition. At the time of recording, there don't appear to be any plans for a re-release in the current edition. Chris Wilson, writing for Time, describes the world as a good candidate for television adaptation, a richly imagined world with traces of Dune mixed with Jedi-like powers and a healthy side of murderous human-sized praying mantises. John Bachtel of Wired describes Athas as the swords and sorcery equivalent of Mad Max, a desert world where water, steel and kindness are in short supply, where magic destroys the environment and the kings and queens are exclusively evil. Elves are untrustworthy merchants and halflings are cannibals. It's a riot. In his 2023 book, Monsters, Aliens and Holes in the Ground, RPG historian Stu Horvath noted, Dark Sun is perhaps TSR's most obviously political product. Coming as it did in 1991, a year after activists brought the 20th anniversary of Earth Day to the international stage of the multi-million-dollar awareness campaign, it's difficult not to read the campaign setting as a grim warning. 30 years later, Dark Sun still feels relevant as a cautionary fable about unchecked power and a disregard for the environment. So, there you go. Get ready to face the fire of the Dark Sun. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about our experiences playing Dark Sun using the old school essentials. So time-honoured styly. What we'll do, we'll go around and tell a little bit about who you are, if you've got any social network handles, and who your character, or even characters, perhaps Kat, if you can remember them, you played.
Okay, hi. So I'm Neil Benson. I go by the moniker of Old Scouse Role Player on Blue Sky and various other things. I think that's at Old Scouse RP. Yeah, and I played Shalba in Dark Sun, who was a nasty little halfling ranger who I had great fun playing. Firing arrows into combat from a distance while everyone else got mauled by the monsters. Yeah, great fun.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm everywhere on social media as Nevermind the Dice Rolls magazine, including Blue Sky, and I'm probably leaving Twitter like everybody else.
Good plan.
Yeah. My last character who survived was Zorus, our Maul fighter. I also played two other nameless characters because they died and I cannot remember their names. To the brutality of the Dark Sun, they died.
It's fair to say there was a learning curve in this. Is it the first time you played Old School Essentials?
Yeah, probably the first time properly.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. Yeah, so there's a learning curve that's attached to it.
I was expecting more D&D and it wasn't D&D.
No.
I'm Ant. I used to be shit the bed on MySpace. Am I allowed to say that? But I haven't done much. I haven't done much social media since then.
I haven't been allowed to do much social media since then with a handle like that.
And I was playing a screen called Edgar, not because it was very particularly characterful, but he looked like that guy out of Men in Black a bit.
Edgar, oh, right, okay. I wonder where you got it from. Cool, okay.
So
yeah, and so we played, I was just looking at the number of sessions we played, actually, it's quite a lot. So 19 episodes, so we had a pretty good crack at it, didn't we, overall? And so we did have a couple of other players. So we had Howard, who played Dia, who was a halfling druid, if I recall. Yeah. And we also had Rick at Lintillers, who played, I think he was a fighter. Was he a Maul fighter?
Yeah, gladiator.
Yeah. Gladiator, there you go. All right, so we had a pretty good range. So I suppose if we talk a little bit about Dark Sun as a setting first, I mean, had you got any familiarity, awareness of it before we started?
Yes, oddly enough, I did. Despite never playing it in its original form, I had pretty much devoured most of the Dark Sun novels in my late teens.
Okay.
So I had quite a good idea of what the world was going to be like when I volunteered, and I had played one game where somebody had converted it to 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had a bit of experience. As I said, it is a brutal world. It was totally different from all of the other D&D worlds, and I think it still is. I don't think that any other D&D world has this harshness to it. And also, it's probably the only one that I can think of that has turned every single class, race type, and class type on their heads, pretty much.
Yeah, these aren't your normal halflings, are they? In Dark Sun. And
elves aren't these noble leaders who kindly, guide the populace. They're a bunch of thieving ratbags, as we found out.
Yeah, let's say there are possibly some challenging things about Dark Sun, which is probably one of the reasons why hasn't got a current iteration. Anyway, and interesting you say about the books, because I was doing a little bit of reading around it, and it was one of the first the first D&D. Well, there have been lots of D&D novels like R.A. Salvatore, etc. But I think this was the first time they really tied it in. So when they sort of released materials, they also released a series of novels to go with it as well. So they sort of went side by side. So essentially, you could look at the scenario, you could read the novel and see what should happen, and then play the scenario and see just how terribly it would go for your lower level characters. Yeah. What about you, Neil?
No previous experience. I was aware of it. I don't know, when did it come out? Was it like the late 80s or something like that?
It was early 90s. I think
early
it was 91 it came out.
Okay, well that explains it. So I think by that point, I'd certainly moved completely away from D&D or anything like that. Totally into GURPS. That was like, played loads of that. Space at 1889, a few other games. But like D&D was, I guess I was in my, my mid-20s, and I was like, I just like, it felt like D&D was childish to me at that point. So I was aware of it. I must have seen it maybe in Games Liverpool, seen it advertised in magazines, but really didn't know anything about it at all until you said Do you want to play?
Give it a go. Yeah, and I think it was one of those games that had a really strong aesthetic. So they had, as opposed to sort of the more generic, I mean, I'll get sorted for that, more generic art you'd see in other D&D or AD&D worlds, actually. This was certainly, when it was first put together, it was a particular artist called Brom. So he'd got a very specific style, quite jagged, quite, as you say, quite sparse. And it's almost like the association, like in Vampire, was it Tim Bradstreet, the artist for Vampire? So again, it's almost like he set the tone for this thing. As they created more modules, the artwork became less. So quality was variable as it went on, but I think that he really set the tone in terms of certainly the box cover and that sort of stuff. What about you, Ant?
Played it once or twice with some old student friends before they binned me off way back when. So but it was a bit Mad Max, which was still popular at the time, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But
Mad Max, but without vehicles, although you could have like silt sleds and that sort of stuff.
Vehicles. What was our thingy called that we were riding about on the
that what do they call it? The Argosy, the slave caravan thing. It's towed by mechanics. Yeah. Difficult to get up a turn of speed in that though. That's the only problem. So I mean, I never played Dungeons and Dragons back in the day. I never played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but I did buy the Dark Sun box. It was the only setting that appealed to me. I mean, Forgotten Realms, whatever. Planescape, whatever. Nice pictures, but that's about it. But Dark Sun, I think it was that whole post-apocalyptic, and the fact it was so different to the other side of things, alongside the art. I mean, that's what drew me in. And I think it was one of those games again, like I say, obviously lots of novels, but also had lots of like a meta plot. It was the first one that actually had to develop in meta plot as they released the scenario. So you can tell I've read up on this. Wikipedia is your friend. So a little bit of broad experience, a little bit, but not too much. Not for any of us really. I suppose just some thoughts on the setting really. So I mean, Kat, you already made reference to ancestries, races as they're referred to in this. What were your thoughts about that? So obviously you talked about elves.
I like the fact they are totally different. It's not a case of, with a lot of the other settings, from Greyhawk to Forgotten Realms, you're going to have the standard. You could be playing in either. It wouldn't matter. Whereas in Dark Sun, they are very much different to emphasize how harsh the world is. As, for example, Zoros as a Maul. There's no reason for a Maul to exist other than somebody wanted to breed a more capable slave. That's it. That's the only reason they truly exist, which makes it already, you can tell what the setting is going to be like the moment you step out there. And I think with the others, let's say the halflings, they're not cutesy little creatures that, that could have been hobbits should the Tolkien estate not have been so litigious. These are now murderous little bastards. You see them coming, you don't immediately think, oh, yay, a circus. You think, oh, shit, they're trying.
Yeah, I envision them with like little sharpened teeth, because essentially they are, I mean, they're not cannibals because they don't eat each other. Well, they probably would do if they got the opportunity, but they do like the taste of elves.
Yeah.
Who doesn't, Steve? Who doesn't?
A crispy elf.
Yeah.
Possibly
if it wasn't for the fact the world is so dry and barren, you could almost imagine like a Serengeti and the grass moving, and you'd be immediately panicked because you think it's these things coming at you.
Yeah.
But that's what I liked about it, because every single class and the races or ancestries that they give you have all been rewritten to say how harsh the world is and to give you a half a chance of surviving. And that's what I quite like. It is completely immersive. You couldn't tell me that if you're playing this character you could transfer it to any other game and it would work, because I just don't think they would. It's for this setting.
I think, there are a couple of races that are more standard. So you've got dwarves, okay, and they've got their own spin on it as well. I mean, we didn't really explore that, but the dwarves have got this thing called focus. And just to say, we played using the old school essentials rules and sort of a hack that somebody done. So it didn't draw out all of the detail, but in the original rules, dwarves have got to get specific bonuses if they're focused on their task. And humans are humans. So essentially, there's not much difference there. But as you say, everything else has pretty much been turned on its head.
I agree with Kat. I do like the variations from the standard character classes. It felt, and I know you mentioned this yourself, very Forbidden Landish, or maybe Forbidden Lands felt very Dark Sunish, perhaps is the way to say it, or they fit in with the setting. I do wonder how much was lost in the conversion from AD&D to OSE. And whether there were important subtleties lost. But overall, I thought they were interesting. There was some really good interactions between our different characters. I think the fact that we were all, potential savings for Edgar at one point or another was interesting. And I think that's the other thing, like Thickreen, is it? Thickreen?
Yeah.
However you say it.
Praying mantis type dudes, aren't they?
Yeah, so that's definitely there aren't many of them in Lord of the Rings, so that's kind of interesting. I think it supported the world really well. Yeah,
and it certainly brought out the sort of the gallows humour, dark humour side of it as well, didn't it? I mean, there's always that in the games we play anyway. But I think
both times I died, I made certain that my character couldn't be eaten afterwards by Edgar. I died far enough away.
Yeah, Edgar was disappointed by that.
Yeah, well, as Neil was saying, I kept reading cool things about Ttrpg and stuff and online, etc. And then you'd say, no, you can't do that. That's OSE. So, have you seen what I can do to a tin of beans? Nope, you don't have that ability in OSE.
No, I think that's a fair point, actually, because I mean, I will say, Ant, I sort of loved the way you played Edgar with his like pheromones and that sort of stuff, and his multifaceted eyes and whatever. But I think, to your point, Neil, I think there's a lot of rules. I mean, there are a lot of things published for this, and I think that if we were playing it using AD&D second edition rules, you probably would get a lot more out of it. Whether in terms of rules alignment, how much that would have added to the experience of playing, I don't know. I've never played AD&D second edition. I remember reading it and thinking, this just seems like far too much like hard work, frankly, which is why I went down the old school essentials route. But I suppose that's it'd be interesting to run a session. Would it be interested? It would be an interesting exercise. Whether I ever get around to doing it, to run an AD&D second edition, but I don't know.
I don't think that's worth doing. I think we can leave that one to our imaginations. And
exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I like to think I'm a yes and sort of GM generally. But the Thickreen, I think in terms of balancing the classes, I think Thickreen are pretty powerful, which is, it's fine. It's all good. Okay, all right. So so obviously Antros is different. We talked, in terms of equipment. So Athas, the world of Dark Sun, is a metal poor world. So you guys didn't have metal armor. In fact, you didn't have much armor at all, did you really? And due to the vagaries of old school essentials encumbrance, you probably couldn't carry very much anyway. I mean, you certainly weren't able to do a Monty Hall campaign with just loads and loads of stuff on yourselves. Was that different? Was that interesting? Was it a frustration? What was that like?
Bit of both, a bit of each, I would say. Having to carry water, when water weighed so much, kind of felt that was an issue, really. Certainly earlier on. I think we managed it later on in the game. Because water's so important, that makes it it's challenging, really, because you need you want adventuring gear and you maybe want some armor, and there was a lot of inventory management. Some of that was really interesting. I think later on, when we got into the swing of it, I thought it was we had days where we were tracking our resources, food and water, and then Zoras and Edgar had special abilities where they didn't need to consume as much, and there was a lot of that going on. Then we could try hunting or searching for water and so on. I think that was interesting. I mean, there was a lot of it, but I enjoyed that side. But I think it was more about the water being so important, but being so awkward as well. I think was an issue, and I think the other thing then kind of related to that, and you're saying it's not a Monty Hall dungeon or session. I mean, it absolutely wasn't, because there wasn't a bean to be had anywhere, and I think that's like you're saying, like 19 sessions. My character didn't level up in 19 sessions, so that didn't bother me. I didn't feel like I desperately needed to level up. But I think there's some oddities around the setup that kind of make it, that side of it, not the best fit in the sense for OSE.
Yeah. So because we use the OSE sort of travel rules in detail, didn't we? So we actually we sort of stuck with it and played through it. I hear what you're saying absolutely about the water was important, because I think if it hadn't, if the results of not having water hadn't been so punitive,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it says my thinking is that it's a desert world, and it's supposed to be harsh and horrible, and you know, you're worrying about food and stuff. So it's almost it's striking that balance between, yes, it's important, but is it just actually a pain in the arse to track? And I think it sort of wavered over that line at different points.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of when it actually made a difference. And I think the only point it made a difference was in those earlier sessions. I think every other time we just managed. So we were either, you know, we got a bit of money behind us, so we were either to buy water or you know, or be given water or find an oasis or whatever. I don't think there was ever a point I can remember where we were we got somewhere, we had an encounter, and we're like, oh, well, you're you're hungry, and therefore you've got, you know, a -2, or you haven't had water for a day, therefore you're exhausted, or whatever. I don't think we ever got to that. So I suppose the thing is the exercise of doing it kind of felt like doing it just for the fun of doing it, you know, like almost like a mini game.
Making you count water rations. That's what it was.
I think it held us back in some points, because I think because water could be a problem to find, we did hold back a lot and wait around a lot more than perhaps we could have done. But the problem is one random encounter could have absolutely screwed us if we wouldn't have been able to find water afterwards. So I think life got a lot easier once we got Trigger, our Inix, so that we could actually hold more water on there. Because the moment we had something that could carry it that wasn't us, it became a lot easier.
Yeah. And it did influence your planning an awful lot. I mean, you did spend a lot of time looking at the map going, right, okay, how far can we get? How much water do we need? So there's that resource management bit. And as you say, yes, you've got this huge creature, this big lizard creature called, what was it? Trigger, known by Edgar. And but Trigger was really slow. And so basically you were wandering through the deserts. And then, of course, because I was being so, I don't know, picky, detailed about the travel rules and encounter rules, sometimes you have to make quite interesting decisions about, we'd like to run away, but if we do, we'll leave Edgar behind, and all he's got a lot of water, you'd have to stay and fight. So I think it was just interesting to watch how you guys
I mean, the Wyvern could have been a major issue for us, a very big issue for us.
Yeah, but that was really interesting.
As so were 6 scorpions, Steve.
Six.
Well, six very deadly scorpions.
I did scale it down a little bit just because you didn't have everybody there for that subsequent session, and actually you dealt with them very easily, so I was somewhat disappointed, but anyway, that's fine. But and I think, you know, your point about there's not a lot of treasure out there, I think, you know, you came across a lot of opportunities, but you guys were really tentative, probably quite rightly so, because it was old school essentials, probably based on your previous experience about, I'll say, well, you could go over there, maybe there's a lair, and you go, nope, we're not going over there.
Maybe's not enough, Steve. A definite we'd have gone for.
And even at a definite, I'd still be thinking about 4 times whether to do it or not. I think the problem is, because the world is so resource poor, and it is, you know, analytically it is, it means that anyone who has anything is going to fight you to the death for it. It's like, I'm not letting you have it because I won't have it. So, you know, there's no such thing as an easy mark. You know, if you go and steal something from someone, you know they're going to come after you.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that's part of the background of the world. I mean, I think in terms of other systems, so if we think about Forbidden Lands, which could be a really good fit for this, I think you're looking at things like water resource dice. I think what you do is say, actually, you can never have above a D6 or something. So you're always at risk of running out, which would make it a lot easier. And I think if I was going to run it again, probably number 1, I'll probably use Forbidden Lands. And number 2, you could model it in that way. But it's just interesting to work through how old school essentials manage that whole travel thing.
Also, the weather. You haven't touched on the weather.
Oh yes, weather, the best part of the game.
That is brutal. I mean,
very brutal.
Literally out of this whole chart, there is like one where it says cool, one little hex, which we never got anywhere near.
Yeah.
The dice. Yeah, I just used it's like I've had to put a link in the show notes to it. It's just something I picked up offline. It's a fairly standard like hex thing, isn't it? So you'll at the start of each day you roll a d6 and see what the weather is for that day. Admittedly, most of it was either hot or very hot. And when it's very hot, it doubled your water requirements.
Yeah.
So there was an awful lot of, we'll stay in this town till it cools down a bit.
I think the other thing we did, I mean, you're talking about being, having played OSC before. And I think we actually learnt this more as we played the game. Because I think there were definitely some, like the travel rules. I did enjoy exploring that in OSC because I've never really used wilderness travel quite like that before. I think we got to a point with the random encounters where we just realized we could run away. And I think once we got to that point, we were like, let's just run away. And I think the rules were written in a certain way that, if particularly if we were the same movement speed or faster than them, then we would almost certainly get away. So I think it got to a point sometimes where there was a random encounter and we just evade it, kind of thing. I think that was helpful. That was useful.
Yeah, it's interesting just to work through the whole sort of setup. I mean, in terms of experience, so you talked about obviously old school essentials. You get experience from mainly from treasure. Also from monsters as well, in the way that we did it. And again, this is based on the rule set, and we'll talk a little bit about the sort of the hack that we used. I looked at, so actually overall you got most experience from actually defeating monsters, just about.
Yeah.
So it's about 6,500 experience from that, 5,500 from picking up bits of cash. That's between for everybody, so that's a large number of characters over 19 sessions. You actually got the next highest amount was from finding water when you're out in the desert. So 2,000. Water discovered per day, and then finding food, and then a little bit in terms of what the class did. So actually, it was you, Shalba. Every time you found water, you got a real bump for that. But yeah, it was. I say, given the number of sessions and the number of characters involved, it was actually really low. But
yeah, well, I assume that was the way the scenario was.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll talk a little bit about the scenarios in a second because it was 2 that we actually started. And yeah, I think probably AD&D is probably different in terms of how it distributes treasure than old school essentials, possibly. But yeah, I think it's because you valued staying alive over getting here, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, all right. So I suppose the other things in the background was magic. We didn't really get into that particularly. I mean, the idea is that you've got the defilers. So again, this is a post-apocalyptic world, and the defiling magic consumes vegetation or life force around it. The rules, as they're written, even in the hack that we used, means that defilers can they don't use spell slots. They can actually roll, and they can essentially get bonus slots because they're defiling the land around them. But we didn't get into that particularly. And also, the other thing we didn't really get into was psionics, because the AD&D psionic rules are horrible. I never understood them. They're all pretty horrible.
They're all horrible. All of the D&D versions I've ever played, when I've been at a table and someone wants to play a psionic, they're all awful.
Yeah. And the ones that we had but we didn't really use were the planar compass ones, which is there's a plugin for Foundry for that. But again, the whole world is supposed to be, the majority of characters psionic. In reality, it was, I don't know, never really got into that.
I tried to use my psionic ability, so you took it off me.
No, I didn't.
Straight away.
I didn't. You chose to eat a beetle that had got a virus in it that was dampen psionic abilities. That's not my fault, Ant.
Yeah,
I'm merely the arbiter of the rule.
From experience of psionics in D&D, it's just not well thought out enough. It's either too crunchy, too complicated, or I've actually seen people stand up rows at D&D tables over them. It's anything that affects another character's mind. Oh my god, the row, and it's just not well thought out.
It's how you differentiate it from magic, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I just stick to magic. It's less arguments.
Yeah.
I mean, God, I don't know. I know that in Dark Sun there is a psionic ability where you can read minds, and that is the world's worst psionic power to ever allow any player to have, because that will cause a row straight away. I wanted to see how it was going to run with old school Centrals, but there's one part of me going, I'm kind of glad it didn't, because it would have been probably everyone with a book going.
Yeah.
I just feel it's kind of, I don't know. I've never really liked psionics in pretty much anything. To be honest, I just like maybe in some kind of something more science fiction, but certainly like to me it just doesn't go with magic. And like, why, you got magic and then you've got psionics. Yeah, nah, just keep. I think as Kat said, just keep it simple and go with your with your magic. And I think the only place it was significant. I mean, it could have been. It was significant until lost his abilities. But that
put it back. There is complained about.
But the whole point of the adventure, I guess this is spoilery territory to a little.
It's 30+ years old. This scenario.
That's very true. Yeah, we found this out quite early, and is that these beetles that kind of destroy, or they suppress or they remove, as Edgar found out, psionic abilities. So I think that was a big part. That was like the main arc, really, wasn't it? It was about the main thread. Yeah, it was kind of undoing that, really. So, but otherwise, kick him out.
Yeah. It's a shame, isn't it? Really, because I think again, it's a big part of the background, and in the novels it makes big play of that stuff. But I
just find novels, when you read psionic abilities, because we've all read fantasy books with these type of abilities in, it reads brilliantly. You'd love to play a character like that. But the only way you do that is if you're all sitting there writing the story rather than actually role playing out a game.
Neil would love that, wouldn't you, Neil?
I would love that. I love writing stories, mate. Yeah.
And I think that in 5th edition, I think I haven't read them, but I don't know. Kat, are you familiar with it? Because I think they did sort of rewrite the psionics rules for 5th edition. And I think there was a bit of a think they were going to bring Dark Sun out, but I think for reasons we'll come on to in a second, they're probably not going to do that.
I have seen, I've seen some of it, and again, it just straight away is psionics. No, I'm going to avoid this.
Right, the challenge is then now to find a game that does psionics really well, and it's not just writing a story.
Psyweld. Yeah. There's your answer right there. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Surely the name tells us all we need to know.
But I think if you are going to play psionics seriously, I mean, it would have probably been fine for our table because we're actually all just generally quite respectful of everybody else. But you do need the right players and the right GM, I suspect, for it to work.
Yeah, that's fair. And a final element of the world is, I mean, you touched on it right at the start, which is about, obviously, mules are the only way they can exist is essentially as a slave group. And slavery is a huge part of Dark Sun. I mean, we didn't... it was there in the background, but we didn't touch on it that much, I don't think. But I mean, certainly, I don't think I've got the knowledge or the framework to be able to talk about any meaningful way. But that's the one part of the background that gives me pause. In the same way as in We're Playing Forbidden Lands, Neil. There's which obviously is a new game. Yeah. There's an adventure site there called Grindbone, which is just horrible in terms, and it's front and center.
Well, I can see why it's a sensitive thing, but I think if it's like, as long as it's always presented in the sense that it's a horrific thing, then like that, because it was an aspect of history, and it's a terrible thing for anyone caught up in it, but or anyone who was caught up in it. But it's, I think it can be something that can fire, interest in gaming situations, taking down a bunch of slavers, freeing some slaves. I mean, we escaped, we started ourselves. Well, I don't know if we started as slaves or we were, because I think I missed the first session or two, but
yes. He'd fully sold us into bondage to help build, not help build, to build a pyramid for no pay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think.
Oh well. Yeah.
I think Dark Sun Setting has got a lot of slavery in it, but that at the end of the day, with that world, you can see why it's if you change capitalism into magic, that's essentially what has happened. The Sorcerer Kings are right up the top, they've oppressed everyone underneath them to a point that even your grandmother would probably sell you into slavery because she's desperate for the money or water. And quite frankly, if you can't defend yourself, off you go. Which does make you very motivated as a character to stay out of slavery once you get free, and also to usually stick it to a slaver at some stage.
So are we saying that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, etc., are sorcerer kings? That explains a lot. That explains a lot.
I would not like to comment because they've got a lot of money and can sue. Yes.
Very litigious.
Obviously, I would never say such a thing, but
Well, if you've got some, as somebody pointed out, I think they did a calculation for Smug, how much money he had, and he's got less than Jeffrey Bezos. Once you convert his money into cash, it's less than Jeffrey Bezos.
Wow.
How can a dragon be poorer than a human?
Well, there's a story there, probably. Going with
the setting does make it very difficult, and releasing it in the modern day age, they're not known for being that sensitive. Really, their eyes on the bottom line for money, so that's why they probably won't do it. But
I think also it's it can be. I think it's like you're saying with Psionics Cat. You probably need the right players as well, because you don't want some dick doing something like trying to enslave another PC and then treating them like shit and stuff like that. So I think it's like coming across in an adventure. You might come across a village where every man, woman, and child has been slaughtered. Horrific, terrible thing. You want revenge. It can drive the game and so on. Some people would be uncomfortable with that, I guess. But
that's the thing about safety tools, which we didn't go into that at the start, but I mean, because we've played together a lot, so we know between ourselves where our lines and veils are. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. As long as it's something which is unmitigated evil in the setting, which it is in this setting. Interestingly, so just talking about the scenarios we started. So I started you off on one track, and so the scenarios we picked up. So one was called Freedom. So that was the DS one. So that was the first scenario that was released, and another one called the Merchant House of Amkech. And so we started off with Freedom, and these things. I think one of the issues we talked about Psionics taking away player agency, and obviously capturing players hate, or players characters, players hate it because it takes away agency. That starts with, right, you guys are you're in the hold of this slave vessel, you've been sold into slavery, and it's like it's linear from the start. You've got very few choices as you go along. I think you guys obviously the caravan was attacked and you were released, and you just then went and did your own thing. Okay. The scenario had got a way that it wants you to go, and you guys completely went the other way, which is quite right, which is why we ran about 2 sessions of that, and then it just swapped over into something completely different. So I actually spent quite a bit of time scratching around looking for a scenario that you would pick up on, which is where Merchant House of Amkech came in. Because I did
wonder about that, because it suddenly went from one thing to suddenly something else. And I thought, there was one part of me going, have we missed something?
Well, it's because, I mean, those scenarios are incredibly linear.
Yeah.
So, you are in a caravan, you're taken to this city where you're required to build a pyramid, and then something happens. The Sorcerer King sort of transcends, whatever, and then you guys are left to pick up the pieces. But you guys decided, we're not going down that road. And I thought I could, obviously, there's always the option as a GM to sort of move the characters in that way, but it would have been so obvious, and I know that I wouldn't like it if I was in your position. So I said, okay, do what you like. So you ended up going completely the opposite way into that city. But anyhow, I think we managed to sort of tie it all together.
It was seamless, Steve. It was seamless.
Seamless.
I would say there's actually a side effect of resource management, because before we go there, we'll go to the city, and we've got all these schemes whereby we're going to get all this stock up on all this water. And strangely enough, that was in no small part responsible for the death of a number of
characters. You mean?
Our schemes just to make a bit of money or get some.
We really sucked at that.
Yeah.
We set light to quite a few bit things, didn't we?
Yeah,
We were good at that.
That was back when I was absolutely horrified that we'd go straight and destroy stuff. And then later on in the game, there was my character there with the castle foil going, shall we?
Yeah, there was definitely an arc for your characters, Kat, in terms of, you went from, I don't know, thinking this is a bit like 5e maybe in terms of, but then thinking actually let's just destroy stuff, and that's, there's nothing wrong with that. That's it's a healthy outlet in a role-playing scenario.
Absolutely.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It was more the fact that nearly every single hard challenge, I think the first words I heard was set fire to.
I was going to say, I think we did, with that, I'm talking about that bit where we were like, we need to get, we're not leaving Uruk until we've got enough water, so let's do, some heists and stuff like that. And they all went wrong. And I think that was where we were losing characters. And, but they were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun, but I think it felt like the one I remember, the when we raided the merchant's place and we were trying to find the beetles and so on, and it was just rammed with people. But it was really good. It was really like intense. We had to come up with our plan and so on. And inevitably it all went wrong, it's how do we get out? And we managed it, and
it's touch and go.
It was touching on, but it was that stuff is a lot of fun, and I think that's where a game like OSE really shines. Is when you kind of those unexpected situations, and you really you're just trying to pool your resources and trying everything, hoping the dice don't shit on you and stuff like that. That was great. Yeah.
And we did sort of port across, or we didn't, the rule set the hack we were using ported across the character tree from Dark Sun. So Dark Sun, as it was originally put together, you had something like 4 player characters each, and only one of them would be active at any time. But if you're, assuming you leveled up, it meant that you chose one of the other characters that you were to level up as well. So at the start of each scenario, you could choose which one you wanted. In the end, it didn't get to that, but I think I appreciated the sense actually this is a really lethal game world, even for AD&D, which is probably a little bit more would be a lot more forgiving, not as forgiving as 5e, but more forgiving. But there's that sense actually you need a whole line of characters, almost like a funnel. Classics. But
I must admit, I agree with Neil. It was surprising how many people there were, in the merchants and also in the ziggurat and other places. But thinking about it, that's also down to the world, because if you're a slave, isn't just somebody with a collar around their neck. A slave is quite often somebody who has no choice but to work for somebody because they've given them food and water. A lot of those guards probably, because when we killed some of these guards, as we did, they didn't have much on them. There was none of the usual, stuff that you would expect. They had even less than us, apart from their weapons, their armor, which their boss would have given them.
Yeah, and that was all that sort of was taken directly from the scenarios. So in terms of the people that were there, obviously I sort of turned them into like a guard in AD&D. So actually the stats are pretty transferable across to Old School Essentials. Not much required, but they didn't have a lot of stuff, and there was not a lot of armor to pick up.
It sucked if you were playing a character that wasn't a standard size, because there was no way in hell you were getting a piece of armor that would fit. Or to be fair, a weapon. Half the weaponry we picked up, none of our smaller characters could have used it.
And I think just coming on to the rule set, so obviously we used a hack. So this was I'll put a link in the show notes. It was someone called Lixuni98 who sort of basically put together a hack for Old School Essentials, and I think some of it worked really well. So for example, equipment. So in Dark Sun, there's no metal, and so you got bone, obsidian, etc. Eventually, and your weapons could be made of different things. So bone, obsidian, I can't remember what the other ones were, and then obviously you could potentially get metal as well. Although hey, you had an obsidian crossbow, I don't know, but we've
a stone. I think it was a stone bow. You could have a stone bow.
Stone bow.
This flexible stone. Yeah.
And I thought, but I think that handled it really well. So, for example, each, depending on the material, let's say, I don't know, a club would cost 1. If it was a bone club, it would cost 1 copper. If it was a sort of a stone club, it would cost 1 silver. And so the more resilient the material was, the more expensive it was. And then when you rolled to hit, if you rolled a 20 to hit somebody, essentially you could destroy their armor. But if you rolled a 1 to hit somebody, potentially your weapon might break. And again, that would depend on the type. And I like that. That was quite well handled. Psionics, is a bit, it's hard. As we said, it's a hard thing to do. But overall, do you think Old School Essentials, was it an okay-ish fit? I mean, we used the advanced fantasy setup.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was. I mean, I play for a bit of Old School Essentials, and I thought it fitted pretty well. I think I think your choices are limited anyway. If you're not gonna use AD&D again, well, I suppose you could convert it to something like wholesale, like Forbidden Lands. But I thought OSC was a good fit. I think there are some and this isn't just observation, but it's I've read other people saying this as well. Is if you're going to convert something from AD&D to like BX or OSE or something like that, you've got to be a little bit aware of the differences in the power levels. So it's not like a first level character in AD&D is massively more powerful, but I think the fighter gets D12 hit points, I think, whereas in OSE it's a D8, and there's stuff like there's just lots of little bits and pieces like that make them tougher. So I think if you have if you had like 4 orcs against 4 PCs in AD&D, versus the same in OSE, I think the dynamics are a bit different, So, but that wasn't too. There was a few moments where I was thinking, yeah, this is it, this is the end, but it didn't quite work out like that. So maybe the difference is a bit more subtle than that.
And the person that put together the rules hack had done quite a lot of the monster conversions as well.
Yeah,
and so they seem to be about, and where there were things like wyverns, I use the Old School Essentials wyverns. So it's probably more about the opposition you guys are up against, the numbers. But you started as 3rd level. So again, in Dark Sun, you start as 3rd level. So you were a little bit more, massively more, but a bit more competent in that sense. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I thought it worked pretty well. I thought that yes, resource tracking, it's a drag. I just took the weights that are from the D&D cyclopedia for things like food and whatever, and inflicted that on you. We gave the travel rules a quick good run out. Combat, I mean, it's essentially combat's combat. What I really enjoy was I've never run Old School Essentials before. I'd run Swords and Wizardry a way back, a few years ago. But it's the first time I've run a good solid session of Old School Essentials. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great in as much as the freedom to it, because it's not, it's rulings, not rules, that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of room for being a bit creative. So for example, I started using morale for how switched on guards were, or how likely they were to make good decisions. It wasn't their intelligence, but that was their proxy for it. So I felt once I got into the system, and as we ran it on Foundry, so did a lot of work for us, I just started to feel actually it's quite free to be able to run it. So I think it was great from that perspective.
Yeah. I think it did. I mean, it seemed to me all the situations we found ourselves in, it had something to help resolve it, and it was kind of, it just worked well. It felt like it those rulings made sense. And
also I put clocks in it, because I put clocks in every game.
Yeah, I know. You put a clock in it, and but I did think it definitely felt different enough from regular OSC. I think like the differences were like not the core mechanics, but just I think particularly like the classes. I think it was that was where it was notable as well.
What about you, Anx? I think you played quite a lot of D&D back in the day, didn't you? And I know you probably it's not anything when you've got like you remember how old rules used to be and how they are in some Old School Essentials. Sometimes they got a bit, as they all do, got a bit confused. What do you think about Old School Essentials? Essentially, as I understand, it's a rewrite of BX. Is that right?
Yeah,
Basic Expert.
It is. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
I can't really comment. We played AD&D,
okay,
and because we were about 11 or 12, we weren't too what's the word?
Bothered.
About the rules. You use the combat tables and sheaths and sheaths of graph paper, and basically played it like a tabletop war game a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So, but that I can't really comment.
Yeah. Did it feel familiar though to you, as somebody who sort of come back into it many years later?
Well, it's I'd say it was more like the games we used to have when we were in our late teens, early 20s than the ones we had when old school was not old school.
When the old school was the only school.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah. So
that's probably more about how us as players and GMs rather than anything else in the rule set, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about you, Kat? Because that's your sort of first time coming to Old School Essentials. What do you think?
Yeah. I think actually the one thing that's so good about it is, as I said, the Old School Essentials version we were playing was written by a fan who obviously loved Dark Sun, wanted to play it with another system, and has put it into that. And the one thing that Dark Sun does have is a massive fandom of people who I know have converted every single time a new version of D&D came up, they converted their setting into the new edition each time. And they're often available for free and very easy to find online. I was going to say, I enjoyed it. It was a very harsh learning curve for me. Very harsh. There is no wriggle room.
And I gave no quarter, essentially. I thought, this is the lesson that needs to be... I've learnt it. It's your turn.
I think it was more the dice going, yeah, right, you think you're going to do that? Good luck. That's not happening. As I said, I think Old School Central does work really well with the world. I think it has that no quarter thing, and it does work very well. Is it the best for it? I mean, in one way, if you're playing a version of D&D where your characters do have a bit more wriggle room because you're now heroes, which is what D&D tends to do in modern D&D, I think we would probably been a bit bolder about things, a little bit less worried that, you know, someone's grandmother's going to beat us up with a broom, we're going to die. You know, would the ziggurat been totally different had we been playing as D&D? Would we have all gone running in there to defend poor Shalva? Or like we did, which is hide and let Shalva just book it by themselves and hope they didn't spot us?
Yeah, it certainly promotes a different mindset as a player.
It does. I mean, it was fun. I would probably quite happily play a game of Old School Essentials. Not sure about Grindbone at all, really. That's my boat, really, particularly. But yeah, I think it works well with the setting. It's a lot easier to play than Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I'll take your word for that. So I did leaf through the rule book, and there's another version called For Golden Glory. There as well, which I sort of had, which I think is sort of cleaned up AD&D second edition. But I looked at it, I thought there's too many words in this for me, so I didn't go on that route. Yeah, so I suppose the last question is, so well, we've already answered that question in terms of, I mean, Kat, obviously you go back to Old School Essentials again. Neil, you run and play it, that's your thing, so I know you absolutely Old Scouts role playing answers the question for me. What about you, Ant? Would you be interested in playing Old School Essentials again? Is that something that or would you want something with a bit more crunch to it, maybe?
Yeah, I'd go for it again. I didn't have any objections to it. Yeah. But I'm still liking the early experience of Dungeon Crawl Classics now.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I'd like to do a bit more of that as well.
Yeah, well, I've bought the module for Foundry for that now, so we can, and I've bought a couple of scenarios as well. So yeah, so we'll give that a go. It's good fun. It's a similar experience, but obviously with a slightly different vibe to it. And what about Dark Sun as a setting? So if there was going to be an official Dark Sun Old School Essentials or something, you know, let's say not 5e, but would you want to revisit the world? Let's say
I would, yeah, definitely. I mean, as a player, I don't think it's something I'd ever GM, but I think as a player, I think it's interesting. I think I kind of feel we only scratched the surface, really.
Absolutely.
I think it does. I think it works well in like a city or a location. I think it works. Like I would say, the stuff I enjoyed the best was either when we were in the city, or we were in the fort, or we were in the ziggurat was, and so on. I think those were the bits that I enjoyed. Although some of the traveling, encounters were good as well.
Yeah, I think it probably, because you say once you get out the city and you're traveling from one place to the next, you're in trouble. If you sort of, again, you're being true to the setting, which is why most people don't travel, or they travel in large groups. But anyway, what about you, Kat?
I'd definitely play Dark Sun again. I really enjoyed it. Oddly enough, once we stopped playing, because I held off a bit, I went back and reread some of the books I've got and looked at some of the history again, because you do forget, because it's been a while. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. As I said, the cities are designed to deliberately keep people from realising just how bad the world has got. That's why you never leave. Why would you go out there? Look at what you've got in here.
Yeah, it's that whole post-apocalyptic vibe, isn't it? What about you, Ant? Any more Dark Sun on the horizon? If they did Dungeon Crawl Classics Dark Sun, what about that?
Yeah, I'd do that. I'd do a bit more Dark Sun. I enjoyed the varied diet that we had in it immensely.
Yeah, whatever you killed or was killed around you, Edgar took pleasure in. I think the resounding cry was, "If I butcher this, how many rations will I get out of it?" That was the.
There wasn't a big enough. I don't think that like 2 rations from a wyvern was particularly accurate. That was a big creature.
Yeah, I agree.
2 rations.
Yeah, we only got 2 rations out of the damn thing. Not that the rest of us wanted to eat it. Maybe we had.
Two rations. He did let us make a wyvern hat, though.
Yes, this is true. We did have a wyvern hat, and it looked very fetching on Edgar.
A fashionable wyvern hat. Wow. Okay. And on that slightly bizarre note, all right. Thanks very much, guys. Take it easy.
No, it's great. It's great. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another exploration of my gaming vexes. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to add to what you've heard here, or a gaming vex of your own you'd like to offer up for discussion, you can get in touch with me on Blue Sky via @allanth.bsky.social or via Discord as allanth.vex. Until next time, may all of your games be free of vexatiousness and be excellent to each other always.